Bonnie Meyer. I've known of her work in reading and writing since the 1990s. The text structure strategy. Her work actually dates back to 1975 with the publication of the book, which probably was your dissertation, maybe not, I don't know. The Organization of Prose and Its Effect on Memory, cited at least 1,700 times. She has her... Oh, wait, it gets better. She has her PhD in educational psychology from Cornell, 1974, with minors in measurement and psychopathology. She's worked as a school psychologist and a learning disabilities teacher. She started at Arizona State University in 1976, became the first woman and the youngest person to receive ASU's Faculty Achievement and Research Award. Bonnie became a full professor in 1982, then held consulting and research posts at Stanford and University of Washington, and in 1990 became a professor at Penn State. She also studies not just reading comprehension and memory, and these are overlapping, but the lifespan development, specifically reading comprehension and decision-making across the lifespan. She's been on the faculty of gerontology, the Gerontology Center at Georgia State. She is a fellow of, okay, here it comes, APS, which is the Association for Psychological Science, AERA, 3 divisions of APA, including Division 15, of course, but 20 adult development and aging, and 3 experimental psychology and cognitive science. And this summer, she became a fellow of the Society of Text and Discourse. Wow. She has received numerous awards. Her article, Meyer, Brandt, and Blush, in 1980, is one of the top 5 highest citations in the Reading Research Quarterly. For the last 15 years, she's received IES development or efficacy grants, including one to develop, we might be hearing about today, an intelligent tutor for text structure. She has received funding for 20 years from National Institutes of Health and the National Institutes of Aging, and is currently the PI on an NSF grant. So regarding Division 15, she has many years of service as treasurer, council representative, member at large twice. She served on a ward committee, started out as our NEP newsletter editor in 1981. She's just been a delight to work with and has been very supportive. So I'd like to introduce you and her speech. Bonnie J.F. Meyer.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me? Okay. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve as the president. I've always, it sounds like I've had a very long life. I'm still standing. And I've always enjoyed Division 15 and thought of it as my professional home. And so it was a treat to serve as your president, and I appreciate it. This August, it marks 48 years since I started in educational psychology at Cornell, and 44 years of membership in Division 15. Not as quite as long ago as Thorndike, but it's interesting. There's a bear out there. Okay. And a baby bear. So I am going to talk about the development, impact, and outreach of the text structure strategy to boost reading comprehension. It has been about 15 years of grants developing this. It may not be the topic for someone that is trying to get associate professor and tenure because it is a long, tedious process of developing an intelligent tutor and making it better and better and testing it. So these are the 5 IES grants. And to start out, I'm sure we all recognize how important reading comprehension is, not only for children, but across the lifespan. But unfortunately, many students struggle. 64% of 8th graders are at below basic and not proficient, according to the NAEP 2017. And I'm very interested in people having, across the lifespan, the ability to read a text and understand what the author was trying to tell them. And if it's a messy article, then reorganizing it so it's more coherent. And also comparing information between different pieces of text for everyday life. For example, I had the experience of being told, well, Dr. Slavin mentioned how people get really excited about the new development, and medical research is very good, but they also get really excited about their development. And I was in a decision-making process about what to do about whether to take chemo or not for breast cancer. And they gave me the literature saying, sign up, you may not have to take that awful chemo if you, depending on how this oncotype test turned out. And I had naturally, I applied my research skills, because that's how I cope with life. Doesn't work too well with my husband, but coping, trying to get all the articles and read them. And I had to pay for the test myself, so my motivation was high. And I saw this table in this other paper that showed that people with the kind of cancer that I had, a genetic, not genetic, but a characteristic, HER2 positive, if they took this test, only like 1% ever came out saying you don't need chemo. So I pointed this out to the doctor. He goes, oh, you're brilliant. You're smarter than anyone in this whole facility, or most of the people on the Hill. That's the university. So, but that's a moot point, whether that's true or not. But the important thing is everyone can do that if they know how to carefully read and they're motivated. I mean, I was motivated not to pay for this test if I didn't need it. And so it just shows me that in everyday life, we want students, and particularly this talk is about upper elementary and middle school students, to acquire skills so they can read and use information throughout their life. So I was just going to carry the peas on from Michael. And I'm going to give a little overview and talk about people, passion, persistence, past and present with text structure instruction. So, oh my, looks different here, but some will. I just wanted to show you that when I started out, I was using Cornell undergraduates. I had no idea how bright they were. I got an inkling of it when I went to the library and everyone glared at you if you even sneezed. Well, I was used to Washington State University where it was a dull roar in the library at all times. But it was nice to have these participants because I got to see what really good readers do when they read expository text. And this is just an overview that I was very interested in text variables like text structure. And then as I branched out with older people across the lifespan, you better consider individual differences in characteristics of your readers. And so here's text structure. By text structure, I mean how a piece of text is organized, which ideas are main ideas, which are details, and how do you figure out which are main idea and detail. But I'm really interested in the logic that with these different kinds of rhetorical structures that crafts the main idea at the top with supporting details and then way down some picky details. And then we see pictures of, we have for 5 basic text structures, signal words that can cue you into those structures. Oh, I'm moving away from your little recording here. and patterns in how you set up a main idea, and then our intelligent tutor that we tried to make friendly. Right now, I mean, we had a student, a high school student, tape the voice because 15 years ago, the computer voice wasn't quite as inviting. But, I mean, this person he had a wonderful voice, and he taped it, and we had to follow him all through his PhD in music and on in his career because we kept changing and making it a little better, or etc. So, just to show you the impact, although we're empirical kinds of researchers, many of us, this is just gives you an idea of the impact that this can make. This is a 5th grade below average reader on a pretest compared to 10 sessions of the intelligent tutor, teaching him how to organize things with the compare and contrast structure. So if you look at his recall, it was about 2 different kinds of monkeys. And there's really, on the pretest, no indication that there were 2 monkeys. It says the monkeys are smalls, monkeys weigh less, 4 ounces and a few inches tall. So he is not using the text structure strategy where you're organizing what you remember. You're using these different discourse types to encode and retrieve and store information. He didn't store much, and he wasn't using comparison and contrast. So after instruction, we have explicit direct instruction with lots of practice with the intelligent tutor modeling as best as a talking head can model. So, but it seems to be effective. So then you see the child is setting up with the first sentence that there are 2 different kinds of bats, and the description of the black flying bat, fox bat, and then another sentence. So he's going to have a transition sentence. We talked about the black flying fox bat. Now we're going to talk about a smaller, so they're comparing the 2, bat, the leaf nose bats, and then information about them. So we have been able to increase reading comprehension in 4th graders through 80-year-olds with this strategy. And after Dr. Slavin's talk today, I had to go. We have a What Works Clearinghouse 2012 entry with 4th graders. And then, as he said, evidence from ESA is way more up to date. So here this says we have 2. So we have the 4th graders that What Works Clearinghouse picked up. We have the 5th graders. These are large. You can see there's 2 studies with over 5,000 children. And then also, I was just curious, and they all are strong evidence, as if you went to the talk today, because we had an article last year, and I was just curious, is it there? And it's there. That 2007, published August last year, it's there. So that's mainly for you to be more interested in the talk. And it was fun to look that up. So that was the most recent one, and I was happy to see that it was picked up. I do see Michael Cook in the audience, and I forgot his name, but I did not forget him. But I just listed people that I've collaborated with over the years, starting with my advisor in graduate school, George Monconky. And if your name isn't there and I've collaborated, I am remembering you, but I ran out of room on the page. Okay. So I really appreciate my growth from interacting with different people over the years. And also people at home and in schools. As a grandmother, one can't escape pictures of 3 grandchildren. And I have children, one's a teacher, one's a veterinarian, and one's a computer scientist. And I'm not diminishing what I think is very important about the productive partnerships, but I was thinking of my own homegrown productive partnership, which is my daughter, who's a teacher, who is a national board certified teacher, has taught grades 5 through 8. And I gave just my storyboards that I gave to computer programmers to my daughter, and she used them in 5th and 8th grade and organized the whole middle school to use a structure strategy in science and writing. And when you have a teacher that's really excited, there's probably no intelligent tutor that will come near that. So that's been fun, and now she is a regional literacy coordinator with 59 school districts, so I'm excited to see. I've learned a lot from her. Like, she's piloted a lot of our grant materials, and she's given us a lot of really good ideas and feedback, so I'm interested in the next years ahead. This is a brief sketch she made for evidence-based practices. So her school district and is interested. And I just want you to note the back of the chair is text structure. It includes story structure, but it has problem, solution, compare and contrast, sequence, description, and what was the other? Cause and effect. So it's supporting you on the chair while you are becoming a proficient reader. And also the people of various ages and backgrounds that we've worked with in studies. They've given me good ideas as well. These are just the grants. The first one was a development grant, and we've had 3 development grants and 2 efficacy grants, plus the swell and is Karen Harris here? Yeah. And we collaborated some with Karen's work, and she's just been, she and Kay have been our co-PI in a new efficacy grant. So my passion has been developing programmatic research about text structure. And how this started, and thinking of the graduate students, although the graduate students are probably already have a dissertation topic, I was just going to encourage you to look for relationships between different research areas. And my second semester in graduate school, I took a verbal learning class all about word lists and pairs of words. And I remember being just so excited when Gordon Bauer came and talked about organization of word lists as being important. But I also was taking a graduate seminar with Marvin Glock and looking at reading comprehension, which was mainly multiple choice tests. And I was really interested in I love the experimental design and rigor of the verbal learning psychologists, but I wasn't too excited about lists of words. So I wanted to use real, authentic materials. So I went over to the library, took the Scientific American off the shelf, and picked 2 articles to use. I don't know if you can see these antique pictures, but I noticed that they were organized in different ways. One was about the therapeutic community, a type of mental illness treatment, and all these ideas flow from here. This is just kind of an introduction to the beginning. Well, the other one, and probably not popular with a lot of people, is one that I found, and I'm very thankful I found it because it had 3 distinct groupings, and the most really important idea didn't come until the 3rd paragraph. So I was looking at traditional things like serial position effects. There was some Ronald Johnson's work on rated importance, and I was looking at what predicts, it's a correlational There were some theories that I was looking at, but they're gone, by the way, so don't bother that. But I'm thankful for my advisor letting me do an exploratory study that didn't have to follow his research, and I had a very great advisor. So these are just some of the studies that influenced the intervention. So that the logical structure of text is a better predictor of what people recall than the order, although writers use order to put important things first. And it's also a better predictor of what people remember, and this than rated importance. And so this study provided me a method of looking at recall from text rather than looking at multiple choice questions, and how to specify what's a main idea and a detail. Interesting and strangely how things go around, I'm working on a grant now that's very similar to predicting what people recall. The difference is technology. We're using fMRIs, we're using STEM text. They have to be a certain size of sentences to read in the scanner. And we are collecting eye movements. And we're looking at how we can predict recall. And it's some of the questions are the same, except at Cornell I had a Wang calculator in the lab that was the room of about the size of a closet. So technology has changed. But some of the ideas are similar. This was an interesting study that just came out. Mayatsu, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, in 2018. They were doing a twist of, instead of teaching people good strategies, let's look at the strategies, because we can't get them to use our good strategies very often. They don't continue to use them. Let's look at what strategies students are using, and then let's look at best practices and how to use the strategies students are using. And there were 5 strategies, and one was outlining and one was marking, which was like highlighting. And they mentioned our work with young and older adults, and also with children as being best practice for outlining and marking. And I think really those top-down trees were outlining every single thing in the passage. And then I would put those ideas and have on strips of paper, and I could get other people to agree 91% on those intuitive logical structures. But speaking of outlining, which was the last paper, I may have, still been outlining if I hadn't taken a linguistics class at Cornell, and the professor said, "Wow, what you're doing on your master's thesis is very similar to what Joseph Grimes is doing in linguistics." And so I went to see him, so get out and meet people. If you're a student, knock on the door. And put him on my committee. He was writing the book, The Thread of Discourse, at that time. And I made my special interest in EdPsych on semantic discourse analysis. And then, instead of having these trees that I intuitively put together, I could train other people to make these trees with these semantic grammar of propositions. And Grimes had like 18 categories of these rhetorical kinds of relationships. And I grouped them in 5 ways because I knew that working memory was limited. So there are 5 that kind of collapsed his original work that was related to Halliday's work as well. And so there is my article that I just ran into at the library. 3 different environmental problems, and the solution, probably not a favorite today, but at that time it was a new solution, the fast breeder reactor. And so it was that overall structure that there were no serial position effects at all when the solution is coming like halfway through the article, because the solution is, it's about a problem and what the solution is about. Basically, with different manipulations that I won't go into, I could empirically find out that it was the pattern of relationships when they're high in this structure that made a difference in what people remember. That same pattern low in this structure was idiosyncratic. I mean, some people like to know you crush eggshells to feed to parakeets for their calcium supply, but everybody wanted to know that parakeets are ideal pets for people with limited time, space, and money. Okay, so it was those patterns high up, those patterns of those rhetorical relationships, problems, and solution, cause and effect, that, in fact, that usually in a problem solution, you have a cause and effect. And if you have a good solution, it will be responding back and getting rid of that cause. So anyway, that's what made me focus on these overall top-level structures of how text is organized. And that influences the training program, because we're teaching kids that text is organized. You can use, we don't say this, but you could use the affordances of text to help you in figuring out what's important and relating it. That knowledge about text structure becomes part of that prior knowledge, and we all know prior knowledge is very important. They can use that. In fact, if you read in an area that you don't know much about, you are looking for those signals to help you figure out what's the cause, what's the effect, what's important. So this was another, well, I guess I have friends that are passages. So this is a 9th grade reader passage. It was just in their weekly reader magazine, and it's been a great passage. It's about super tankers, problems with spills from super tankers, and ways to solve those. So again, you see the top level structure is problem and solution. There's a description about the problem and a cause for the problem, lack of power and steering equipment in emergency situations, and then there are just all these examples of oil spills. That's why at the very bottom in the chicken-looking tracks, you might have 200,000 dead seabirds washed ashore on the coast of England or something like that, but it's not in the overall logic of what's really important, but it's a nice elaborating detail. And then this had what's not a solution, so you get a comparison there within that overall structure. So these structures embed upon each other. And then 3 good solutions that the author is recommending. So this was the Meyer, Brandt, and Bluth article where we started working with students in 9th grade. We had the magazine that was part of their materials. And basically, we were looking at, well, about that time, when I first started doing this, Kinch, as many of you know, the Kinch, had his discourse analysis. It was nowhere when I started. There was Crothers doing a system related to prior knowledge, and but by the time I got out of graduate school and got into a job, I thought, wow, Kinch's system is a lot faster to do. I thought it was a little stupid and that it was based on argument repetition. And if you had 2 examples, you didn't know that, well, there's a description, there's 2 examples of something. The second example might be way down here, and your prior knowledge about text structure doesn't influence. But that's where Van Dyke came in with his macro structures. But anyway, so I was thinking, well, what's unique I can do? And I can look at these rhetorical relationships and these patterns and these top-level structures. And I wonder if good readers can use those patterns, good readers in ninth grade. And what about readers that have adequate decoding skills, but a stay 9 lower on reading comprehension? Do they need a little help? Will they be helped if I have the passages with those signal words? This is the problem, this is the solution, this is the cause, as a result. And so anyway, we're using that passage. This was the actual passage, and we're underlining, signaling words, and etc. And this was the model we were looking at. We were looking at strategies. So that's where the good grief. Well, I am 70. Tetrahedral model comes into play. So you've got the reader variables and the strategy variables, the materials variables, what you're looking at. And so we characterized readers that weren't using the structure strategy, like the pretest that you saw about the students recall about monkeys. Just, I remember this, I remember that, I remember this, but no organization or how this idea relates to something else. So we called that the default list strategy. You don't really have an efficient strategy. You just, got to remember something, okay? And then you have people that have the structure strategy. And so then we also had what the text is like. Is it well organized? Does it have those signaling words in there to help you out? And processing. So if you have the structure strategy, you have the signals in the text, you're going to recall the text with the top-level structure of the text and more detail, more main ideas than details. If you don't have those signals in there, we predicted that high-level comprehenders could do it anyway. So, but if they're stressed, like you have to be clicking or you have distracting things going on, well, maybe they'll have trouble. So that was a decision point. And then with the list strategy, if that's your strategy, if you have those signaling words, that's enough help so you can actually use the structure strategy. And basically, that's what we found. And then nothing really helped the low comprehenders, regardless if you signaled or not. And we tried a number of different things like advanced organizers and repeated readings of the same passage. And then my student Brendan Bartlett did the first text structure training. So we thought they need more than our advanced organizers and our repeated reading. And so that was the beginning of the text structure strategy for his dissertation. But you see that of a sample of ninth graders, only on two passages we looked at, a problem solution and comparison text, only 48% were using the structure strategy. And 30 years later, we did the same thing, and still about 40, 50%. And this is an example of the default strategy with the supertankers. It's just, there are oil spills, this, football fields. No idea that the football fields was to give you an idea of how big the supertanker was that would impact its spill. Okay, so that research, the research is influencing this intervention that we're getting out eventually with the intelligent tutor. And it was the time to do think alouds, and we did them in the 1980s. And we had a model for how you use the structure strategy to encode text. And one thing I want to bring your attention to, because I'm trying to push this idea of this talk, is it's a strategy particularly for adults. You could choose not to use the strategy. I just want to know who won the election in Minnesota or something like that. You don't really care what this author has to say. So, but then the next decision is, can you use the structure strategy? I'm really passionate about getting kids to be able to use the structure strategy. It's, and I think they all, deserve to be able to read and understand what they're reading. So in the structure strategy, we teach children to identify the 5 top structures that I told you about, and to use that to organize their reading. And then these are the various structures. So we define them, we give signaling words, and we always give an example about whales. So you can see how you can cast ideas with different structures. So I'm not going to go through them, they are here. And then I hypothesized that certain structures were more memorable than others. Because if you just have a description, a short description, you can try some other mnemonics to help you remember the details about that. You can have listing. We used to call it collection. You're collecting a group of things together you're going to talk about. There's really not much, except you scoop these things together. There's not much structure. There's less helpful structure in using that kind of text structure than the more organized ones. Then you can have things grouped sequentially in time. And kids seem to learn that first. So they're ordering things in time. Then cause and effect, and usually, but it doesn't have to be, the cause is first. It's in time, it's grouped, it's all those things on that scale. And then problem solution can, if you know a solution or hypothesize a solution, it'll have grouping, sequence, cause and effect, and problem solutions. So there are lots of these structures and embedded structures that you can use for encoding and retrieval. And comparison seems to be on another dimension and can go from very complicated comparisons. We have Panning here, so we have our article with refutation text, legal arguments, or just kids come to school knowing about these relationships, like my piece of cake is less than yours. But they don't really know how the texts are organized this way, and they can use these structures. So this red-lettered slide is showing that Roy Friedel and I did this study showing that some text structures were more memorable than others. So text structure not only is part of text, but they have parallel cognitive entities for in your mind. I mean, you think about ways to solve problems, what causes what. Oh, this is playing itself. So I've itemized the power of the structure strategy to organize what you're reading and to use those same organizational structures to think about your reading and to write something else. And it is not, even though some misconceptions exist, it is, the text structure strategy is not like, you need to know this text, we're going to pour it in your head. No, it's comparison, adversity of here. The thing is, you're going to use these relationships when you think, when you read, when you write, when you discuss. Meyer and Kuhn, that was a very fun study with young and old adults learning the structure strategy, and we even had them see if this transferred to a video on nutrition, about a 15-minute video, and a medical decision-making task. And it did, they could remember more. Oh, I should be looking at my watch. So it's important to know that you won't often find these perfect structures that are texts that are only one structure. But that's a good way to learn. And Joanna Williams, in her second grade materials, she's making it very, just one structure. Some of these structures that I always have at least 2 paragraphs and show how these paragraphs are related. She's in some of the structures, and she piloted this with the second graders, they could only have the relationships between 2 sentences. So it might be a number of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, rather than the cause part here in one paragraph and the effect part there. But these relationships do embed and are hierarchical and logical. And this is compatible with the landscape model of text comprehension, also the situation model in Kinch and Van Dyke's work. And it's one way to organize and make sense of what you're reading if you know about these structures that authors use. So the ultimate goal is for proficient readers to know these kinds of relationships and build coherent memory representations even when the text is muddled. In our training, we use a lot of scaffolding in the beginning, and then and lots of signaling words, and they're clear and not muddled text. It gets a little bit more. We show how problem solution and comparison can work together and things like that. But we don't. With adults, I had to pay the Chicago Tribune for their muddled text. So, but your goal is, if it's muddled, you reorganize it in memory using these structures. And then a number of people have talked about how these cue words or word order can, too, influences really the processing instructions that the readers are giving you for processing text. But what about readers who do not know how to use signal words or text structures? Because I found that the lines that go up like that are young, average verbal adults and high verbal adults, and old adults that are high verbal. Signaling helps them. It helps them to use the structured strategy. But the lines that go down are the average verbal older adult, and these are actually high average. Aging was a lot more fun to study when I was young. But anyway, but I've always worried about those people. We could train them, and we recruited them for a study at Penn State, and you can teach them this structure. In fact, we've looked at all kinds of learner variables and found really nothing. Well, low education helps because we have a lot to teach you. The only thing is not making it through the Alzheimer's screening is the only individual difference variable that I've seen from 4th graders on that predicts whether or not this instruction will improve your reading comprehension. So I just wondered if these older people that are average verbal never learned this in school, learned it, and I have a feeling a lot of them never learned it, and the high verbals pick it up on their own. But I was concerned about that. So now I have just a little wake you up. I made 15 of these for a signaling test. And I'm giving you a big clue because for the children, we say just make this more readable and fill in the blanks. It seems like close should be easy, but in order to do a good job on this, you have to actually read both paragraphs. And so I'm giving you a pause to read. Mike Cook can't give us the answers. He was the research associate. Okay. So what might a signaling word, is it going to be a problem solution signaling word? Is it going to be it's going to be what? It is. Okay. And what might you put in the first blank? Different. Right. And this is the easiest word for students from 4th grade to 8th grade to fill in. Although 4th graders, we had thousands of 4th, 5th, 7th, and 8th graders. Another tip I have for you, if you are doing large data sets, do not keep staring at your computer screen. Look away. Because I ripped a hole in my from just staring there being so. I've always loved data. I got that from George McConkie and Keith Rader. So look up now. That's right. So high, middle, and low comprehenders in 4th grade. The low comprehenders in 4th grade aren't getting this blank. The middle, not too much, but the high comprehenders are. And what would you do with the next blank? So any of those will work. We have like a 7-point scale, and all those I hear are really high points. But that is tough. That is tough for kids. And even 8th graders are having a hard time with that. They're not giving, they might be giving the opposite. That's what I've really been fascinated with looking at this data. They're giving it the opposite, sometimes signaling word or content. Lots of the low comprehenders are putting in cute or something pretty, something like that. But that's a really hard one because you're transitioning. That's the transition between one creature and the next. And what about for the next blank in that same sentence? Smaller. So you have to look back, you have to look at the numbers, figure out. And that's hard too for the kids. And the last blank. Am I hearing what, like? That's right. No wonder you're such a good communication student. So, in searching through high, medium, and low kids in 4th through 8th grade, I am finding some interesting things that I have to follow up on because some of the people in the training are putting the opposite. They're going unlike or in contrast. And I need to, because I have 4th graders that are doing that and 8th graders, and we modified the 4th grade program where they didn't do recalls anymore, so they wouldn't really have to know the similarity. But the 8th graders, they should be able to figure that out. But they could be, it could be a motivation thing. This is all contrast. Because similarity is supposed to be easier, but that's a hard one for them. We did, without training, we did, this reminded me of the older adults because this is the line that goes up and down. That was people that weren't trained, but they were using these measures. We were piloting the measures. But notice the 9th graders are at 4th grade level. And that same pattern for that transition signal word and for the last signal word. So something's not too healthy with the 9th graders. This is just a picture again of a recall with a default list. You could recognize them easily. They're not using text structure, they're not using anything but listing things. And this was a student before instruction. In all of our training, the intelligent tutor and in classrooms for young and old adults, we always model the strategy, show how you can use it strategically for encoding, monitoring, and retrieval. And then this is the student after. And again, you're seeing a problem solution instead of a list-like thing. People are recalling a lot more. They've got it. This is a problem part. They signal it. This is the solution part. And this is also the same person in a comparison passage. So just visually, you can see they're remembering more. They doubled the information they could remember. This book, Memory Improved, has the teacher manuals and the student manuals if anyone wants to try this strategy in their classroom. Also, it's been published again in 2014. But it's this program that we adapted for the intelligent tutor. Just a brief test. Can you remember this? Can you read that? Not remember. Can you read that? Or is it too little? Can't read it? With 8 brothers and sisters, birthday parties used to be a problem. Now I send the birthday bouquet. What overall text structure organizes that ad? Problem solution. Okay, good. What about this one? My brand versus the others. Okay. And as I said, you can find comparison articles across the range for complexity. And this is one of my favorite ads because it's unusual for an ad to equally weight 2 options. So comparison can come in, these are 2 options, and you only have 1 turkey, you have to decide which one. But it's not the usual Reynolds wrap versus the other brand that's inferior. This is, you're different on the way you use aluminum foil, but the outcome is the same. A bird roasted to perfection. Okay? So a lot of persistence. Because Brendan and I, when that book was published, Larry Erwam went to school districts, went to school publishers with us. We were trying to get into materials for children with the text structure strategy. And they just said, no, we don't want supplemental materials. No supplemental material. You know, I know we did consulting, like, for GIN, but you just get a little thing that just says these are the names of the structures. You don't learn about how to apply this strategically. And young and old adults in other studies would say, what? Oh, this is what not the young adults, but the old adults might say, this is what my grandchildren need. They need to have this. So, you know, I joined a group interested in intergenerational research. And this was the first text structure strategy study. We adapted the materials that we'd used with adults in that Memory Improved book. And then we had older adult tutors tutoring online rural students. And it was random assignment to the instruction with just once a month letters from the picture of a tutor, a static picture, not a tutor, but it's an instructor. Then the same thing except with your tutor that would coach you on the structure strategy, and then accelerated reader, which was the as-is treatment in the schools. And we talked a bit this morning about how Context matters. We really goofed on context because our name for the experimental group was the tutoring group, and people said, "Can I get out? I don't want to be in the low class because you have tutoring." So things like that, you have to consider the context. But regardless, they learned a lot. So these were the tutor, Miss Ivy, and the basic plan we use is teaching the structure strategy is we have students identify the text structures, noting that signaling can help, write a main idea with a main idea pattern for each text. For example, with a comparison text, the main idea is a comparison of this and this. Two or more things were compared on a number of issues. And also patterns for writing recall. And then use the main idea and structure to organize your recall. So basically that was the beginning of it, and the effect sizes were good, and but there wasn't immediate feedback. Your tutor had to write back. I mean, there were some just forms that gave you feedback. And 2.5 months later, both of the non-intelligent tutoring groups, I'm saying this wrong, both of the groups that got the structure strategy did better than the accelerated reader, and they all did the same on the accelerated reader test. So there have been a lot of studies over the years that have used this strategy and found it effective. There are 2 recent meta-analyses. And so, I guess, you'll never get to see. Well, it's in the literature. But here, brief looks at the intelligent tutor. And how we use, first of all, we use these patterns, and we don't use any structures until we get to the second structure problem solution, because it's a little bit more complex, and we use visual structures. Information gets more complex, like embedded causals about a dam that breaks. And it's not just for short text. This was one of my friend's basic training. I mean, you might read the title and think, this is about the military. This is basic dog training. So that title's a little confusing, but its overall structure is cause and effect, and then there's a sequence of the dog training, and it's a long text. So we looked about how best to deliver it. I love the individualized study that we do because there are different paths for different learners, and I think that's the power for teachers. It'll offload some of the individualizing, and there are big differences that not so much for the middle students because they get the standard program, but for like enrichment and remediation without the stigma that you're getting remediation, because you're getting the same lesson again, maybe at a different readability level, but the signals are the same and the content is basically the same. So you could be working on your computer. Anyway, individualized was great for teaching the signal, the fill-in-the-blank close task, and great for the gray silent reading test, which is a standardized reading comprehension test. So effect size is good, and we're one of the few, Dr. Slavin mentioned a lot of development. We were one of the few development grants that showed differences on standardized tests. So we're doing more outreach, videos, peppy videos, boring videos, chapters in books for teachers, and there's a special issue coming out on text structure instruction in reading and writing I've read them all, including the introduction by Joanna Williams, which is wonderful, and I highly recommend it. I had my big data thing in there that I won't go into, but I'm going to show you Swell is its, but for Spanish speakers. So you can hover over a word and it'll give you the Spanish. You can click on a sentence and it will give you an easier sentence with context like pictures. The description of whales, their weight and their length, what happens to be krill, the beak of a beaked whale, what's beak. And I mean, I had a lot of fun with these. These are a lot of fun to do these. And then comparing with pictures and a scuba diver. I really like this between the friendly, not friendly dog and the friendly dog. But so it looks pretty, we had another version that was in Spanish. That was, one page was in Spanish and then English, Spanish and English all the way through. But the schools, we could only use those with students in Spanish-speaking classrooms, and most of them are native Spanish speakers, and we used the one I showed with the pictures. But we did get healthy effect sizes on the gray silent reading test, so I assume that helped us to get the next advocacy grant on Swell. So it's powerful. Joanna Williams, it's a picture, you'll see her next year as a Thorndike awardee, and she's arguing for the text structure strategy to be a critical component in grades 2 to 7. And not just a supplementary thing that nobody wants to buy or use. I mean, I don't care if they buy it or not. I just want this to be part of the regular instruction. And you can incorporate finding main ideas, inferences. Most of the things we want students to do can be incorporated in the structure strategy. So, and that everybody needs to be able to find the logic and what is in text. And so on my daughter's drawing, I am putting the text structure underlying the seat of reading comprehension in the schools. And that's it. Oh, and except there. Okay.